So I know pretty much every content creator has done their own little spiel on the new league reveal, and I didn't want to make my own little analysis on that because I feel like everything's already been covered by most content creators and on Twitch, whether it be Twitch or YouTube, I mean. But what I thought would be interesting is to maybe get a opinion from someone who may be considered a noob or like a new player in Path of Exile. Now, a what we would call a new player in Path of Exile does not mean exactly what it would mean in other games, where in other games maybe like 10 minutes or like maybe 5 hours into a game would be considered a new player to a game. But which it is still a new player in Path of Exile. But in this situation, I'm going to be talking to and interviewing a friend of mine who has played one League of Path of Exile, has not played it fully, but has experienced what we would call the endgame mapping and maybe some early bossing. And I figured it'd be cool to ask his opinion on the new league, the changes that are being announced, and I thought we would just bounce off of each other and I would maybe express some of my opinions, but I mainly wanted to get the opinions of someone who would be considered a new or casual player. So, this is Peasant, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Peasant. So I am mostly a MOBA player. I play some shooters. I'm kind of high skill in Dota, and like if you're wondering like what makes my opinions valid here and like why you might want to listen to what I have to say, I'm also a consulting analyst. Like analysis is my job, and I think I have a pretty good grasp on what makes game mechanics fun and enjoyable, and I think I can offer a unique perspective on what I think can be improved on, or what I think, or how I feel about PoE.
Yeah, so your gaming background, you have played ARPGs before, right? I think you played or not Diablo. You played Diablo 3 in the
Yeah,
past. I know that.
played
Um,
Diablo 3. I sunk a lot of hours into that, and got a little tired of it eventually, but wanted to try PoE, that one league, and see if it was
yeah.
better than Diablo.
So you joined in Ritual League, and you got to experience. I think that was it. I think you said you've watched PoE from like afar in the past, but Ritual was the first time you actually kind of jumped into the league, and you managed to. Well, how about you tell me about your experience, how far you got in Ritual, and where you kind of just decided to stop.
So yeah, Ritual League. I've been thinking about playing PoE for some time. Being free to play, that's interesting. I liked Diablo a lot. I was kind of addicted. Um, so, I came to you and asked, like, hey, I want to get into PoE. What should I do? And you warned me it's not easy. Um, so, you started me out in the Ritual League and kind of spoon fed me, gave me starting gear, helped me get through the campaign, boosted me through like hard parts. Um, and then we started working on getting me a build to map together. So you used your pool of money to help buy me gear, recommended builds to me, and then so I had an account to play with you for mapping, and then I made another account so that I could do my own build on the side. And so I chose Blade Vortex for that side build, and
Yeah,
used
for
some
the
of our
solo build.
profits from mapping to pay for it. Yeah, the solo build.
Okay. So how far? Um, So actually, yeah. So I don't want to focus on playing with me. Let's focus on your experience solo, because I would like to kind of dive into the mind of a newer player coming to the game when it comes to solo gameplay. So you played Blade Vortex, and I guess we'll start with the campaign. How did the campaign in Path of Exile feel to you?
So I did not really enjoy the campaign. The story's not coherent. I think everybody knows that. As far as I've heard, everyone pretty much agrees the campaign's not very fun, or it doesn't have a good story. Some people probably find it fun, but
Yeah, I've never paid
I,
attention to the story. I still don't know what's going on. So
yeah,
it says a
it's
lot
not
about that.
engaging. But so I mean, like you spoon fed me like movement speed items,
Yeah,
XP
yeah,
boost items. You
I
gave me
did.
everything,
Yeah, I did. I
and
think I
I
even gave
still
you a
didn't like it.
tabula. Yeah, so that is something that I want to touch on. So I
I
remember you
still
saying you
didn't want to
didn't,
finish it.
yeah, you didn't like it even after the spoon-fed power. And so, how
Yeah,
do you
like you made it
think?
as easy as possible for me.
Yeah,
I could one shot a lot of things. You gave me a build that would work almost all the way through the campaign, and I still was thinking I don't want to finish this.
So I remember you telling me that you watched through that whole thing, Peasant. So I just wanted, first of all, to go into it. What do you think about, you know, the balance changes?
Um, so yeah, I watched the video, in preparation for the new league and then for this interview as well, and I have some notes on that. So I apologize if this sounds maybe more robotic than my other answers, but
No, you're all good.
I'm
You're all
just
good.
gonna kind of go down my list as like in order of which, sorry, in order of what Chris was saying. So his first nerf was going to be increasing the campaign difficulty by increasing or by changing monster mechanics. I think at its base level, this doesn't sound bad, but if we go back to what I said earlier about how I barely wanted to play the campaign as it was, I didn't like it, and they were talking about making it more punitive. I think making the campaign more grueling and unenjoyable when most people are just, you know, the campaign is a gateway to playing the actual game. I don't think you're going to win any fans with that. I don't think that's a very fun way to go about it. I get the idea, but like you got to understand what your campaign is to casual players and veteran players. He's right. Veteran players are just going to find a way to breeze through it, or maybe it's going to tack another couple hours onto their speed run. But what are you doing to the casual players when you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a
He,
very valid
sorry.
concern in that regard. Yeah, you have no problem. I think that is actually a really valid concern because I think it's a very polarizing issue. But bottom line is, if you didn't have to do the campaign, you wouldn't do the campaign. Like, no matter what people say, like, it's not
Yeah,
that bad. Just get it over with. Everyone does it. The problem is, like, it sucks to do. Like, there's no situation where that's actually a fun experience, in my opinion. And you can just go to Reddit, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Discords, you can see a lot of opinions, and the general consensus is I would not want the campaign to be more grueling. Like it's already grueling for people. Like the people that don't think it's grueling spend like 5 to 7 hours getting through it, while people that are coming into the game for the first time, I can't even imagine. They see like that live stream, they see like that coolie mechanic, and they come in and they just get met with a wall, which is the campaign, which they want to make more
yeah.
difficult. So yeah, you go ahead.
I think I think if you want to make the campaign more difficult, you need to actually give it a story and make it interesting. But I think that's really all I've got to say on the campaign, and we've talked about it.
Yeah,
Um,
there is hope in
the
PoE
next,
2 though, so Path of Exile 2 might have a pretty
hopefully,
interesting campaign. But I mean, in the end, people are just gonna.
I've got something about that too.
Okay, all right,
he talks about PoE too, and I was like,
yeah, all right. Let's go to your next point then.
yeah. So, uh, what he calls Flask piano, I'm sure it's a coin term with the community, but it's a good term. He starts talking about how Flash piano isn't fun and it shouldn't be a button. And he's right. That's why a lot of people use scripts because they don't want to button mash. So, what they as developers, from my opinion, they could either make the Flash supply more buffs for less time so we don't have to button mash, or more buffs but longer cooldown. Um, maybe you could stagger the cooldowns, but if you want to add tactical choices to it, like we need to rebalance flasks and we need to be smart about how we do it. Um, it's just more flask charges could be scarce, but they last until death. Like you won't get nearly as many flash charges, but if they
Oh, so
last
that's
until
your
you
idea for
die,
the. So that's your idea for the rework. You'd want like last until you
it's
die,
one
is
of
what
them.
you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
or just make it one button to increase, or like a one button press for all of them,
Yeah. So like the
or
Chinese
be
client.
be
Yeah.
yeah, like but be interesting with how you change it, because what he says he wants the incentives to use the flask aligned with fun. Okay, so typically in a game like PoE, fun means like what's fun to me, and I think to a lot of people is just blowing up mobs. It's fun, and then you get the looting. But flasks are just something where I have to mash keys in order to do that. But it's not interesting gameplay. So like what you can do is just make flasks more passive. Like I said, like flash charges will be more scarce, but they last until death. So you need to be more careful. Like you don't just like obviously you don't want to die on a map anyway, but don't risk losing your flash charge if you've only got three to last you the whole map. That way you don't have to mash buttons. It makes you be more tactful about your gameplay, but flasks are just a waste of key presses as they are. And I think if you want to make them aligned with fun, the answer is not. It's not complicated. Just make them more passive.
Yeah. I agree. I think flasks are the result of, well, they're the remnants, I guess I'll say, of a past, um, experience with Path of Exile. So back like in beta, I think I didn't play back in beta, but I know mob density was extremely scarce, and you did have to really time your flask for certain situations. Now, if flasks were even a good idea in their state to begin with, is its own little question. But the whole quality of life thing, where flasks activate when something happens to you, like some people say, like this is not quality of life, this is a direct power upgrade. Um, I don't think it should have even come to that, to where having automatic quality of life flasks should be a direct player power. I think that should actually just be, in the game from the start. So there is like actually a Reddit thread saying how people believe, like, I don't know if you saw it, but the enchanted item you can put on to where, like, if you're ignited, it'll use your ignite flask.
Right. The instilling orb.
Yeah. So luckily you can put that on every single flask. So that is, I think at least every blue flask at least. So that is something. But yeah, in my personal opinion, I think they should just add the Chinese client flask macro, one button to activate all your flasks. I think it was just kind of weird to address it with this, like this fix. That's just my opinion though. But
Wait, what did they call them? Flask enchantments, I think, was what they called the instilling orb and the kindling
yeah,
orb. Those
yeah,
were the two they revealed.
yeah.
I
It
think the
is a
instilling
currency.
orb's
So one
good
increases the power, but
in a way.
reduces the amount of uses that you can have on it, which I think is pretty cool, because you don't have to worry about pressing it every pack of monsters or something like that. Maybe it's just reserved for the boss or for a very certain situation. So I think that is cool. In my personal opinion, though, I would just like to not have to press flash in general, as least amount as
Yeah.
possible. So one button would be great for me. But
It's
so
just less time you can spend dodging mechanics and other stuff. Like I,
yeah,
it's not tactical gameplay. It's just like an anchor on your gameplay. But
yeah,
like I kind of wanted to mention, like with the flask enchantments, I think the instilling orb is a step in the right direction. But from my perspective, it's a bad enchantment. I don't like the fact that it re-rolls the flask. I think that's a little silly. Like instilled orb should be, if you want to change the flask, that should be a default. Like the instilled orb shouldn't, or instilling orb shouldn't need to be added on, or it shouldn't have any downsides. Or like maybe the downsides, you get like one less charge per flask or something. Like, that's fine, but like don't re-roll my enchantments. You're making it more difficult to use the flask. But the kindling orb was really good. I think buffing the flask so that while it's active, it can't gain charges, but it extends your buff duration.
hmm
I think this is what you really want to see in a rework. It has a large upside, but a moderate downside. Um, it doesn't gut the item in exchange for a buff, like in my opinion, the instilling orb does. And maybe the instilling orb won't be as bad as I think it is, but I think a lot of people are going to be careful about using them, or maybe just not use them at all.
yeah,
And then, like on top of that, they talked about monsters getting less flash charges to make the flask use more tactical. And to me, this is not more tactical. It just, to me, this says you're required to use flasks correctly on this new system, or be unable to progress in maps. I think it's really punishing. It takes a lot of the fun out of mapping.
yeah. It has been touched on a lot, and I do share that same sentiment. The fact that I don't want to have to, like, if it's not an automatic quality of life flask, you actually do have to activate it yourself. So when you get ignited, if you don't have the quality of life, I guess we'll just call it the quality of life board, you will have to react to that ignite immediately. Some builds will actually get absolutely shredded by an ignite if it's a very juicy ignite on you, or if it's like a corrupted blood, you need to react as soon as possible, or else you're going to die. Um, Now, I think an issue with that is that a lot of people don't want to have to do that. Like, a lot of people don't have to want to worry about that. They don't want to have to, like, a lot of people don't realize they're ignited until they're dead anyway. Because there's a lot of dots in the game. There's a lot of things that melt your health bar. It's not just ignites. Like, a lot of, like, they should at least, in my opinion, add a better debuff indicator to the game. Like, maybe more visible if you're ignited, maybe a bigger icon. People don't like looking at the top left of their screen, squinting and seeing an ignite thing and being like, is that ignite? I guess that's ignite. I'm dead. you know? So I think that, I don't know. I just think it was a very strange way to address the issue. I thought as I was watching that interview that, oh man, we're getting the Chinese client's flash macro. I think as like the maybe the best way to address the whole flash situation, but that is probably, in my opinion, the best way currently to address it that I can think of. I think that would have
It's
been,
definitely the simplest and the
yeah,
easiest to implement.
yeah. At least that. That would have been cool to me.
I think they thought too hard, and I just don't think they had the right mindset when going through these flasks. I mean, like in some ways they did, but in other ways I think they fell short of what they were trying to
Yeah.
achieve.
So what, so your next point. So we talked about Flask. We talked about, I don't know if we talked about, did we talk about power creep yet? That's the,
That's part of like this whole thing is power creep. The flask piano and campaign
yeah,
difficulty
true.
was to combat power creep.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
I want to,
then triggered skill rebalance, damage so damage reduction is going to be part of that. Triggered skill rebalance, movement rebalance.
mm-hmm.
I fucking roast him on movement rebalance. I don't have like a big note on it or anything, but I think that is such a solid
Oh, the
change.
movement speed one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not even movement speed; it's movement skills.
Yeah, yeah, my bad.
I
Yeah,
think it's movement
movement
speed too,
skills.
but like,
That is a very interesting, yeah. I don't exactly know how that's going to be addressed in the actual patch, but that is just such a weird thing to change. That is an integral part to, like, they've made it so if you don't have a movement skill, the game feels terrible. And
yeah,
it's
it's
like
going to
you
slow
can,
you down in the
yeah,
campaign as well. It loops back to
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's very strange that they want to make it more. I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna adapt to that yet. I think that is very strange that they felt like that was a power creep or gameplay balance thing they had to make. It's just very strange that a mechanic that if you don't have your build feels terrible, they want to nerf. So
I have a suspicion they don't like people bypassing monster mechanics just by dodging, which I think is completely fine. But they were like, "This is not how it was originally intended," but that's a bad excuse. People found a way to combat your mechanics, but you don't like it, so you're just going to get rid of it. But it's been going on for
yeah,
a while, and it's kind of like, I mean, it's been accepted for a long time. I don't think it's a good excuse to revert back to beta days.
yeah. So if you don't mind, I kind of want to go into like the big bulk of what I want to talk about in the power creep thing, and that is just the actual power nerf on players, damage nerf that we know of so far. We don't know all the nerfs, but this is a big thing I wanted to address and I wanted your opinions on. So you mentioned you got through the campaign, grueling, despite, I did give you some gear. So I guess I want to talk about your experience, in maps. We can just go over it real quick, but you said, I think you told me you got to red maps, you chose Toxic Rain, and you reached a 6 link, right? I
Yeah.
think you told me, yeah, and you got to, I think you told me before the interview that you got about 3 million DPS. So, what are your thoughts when Chris Wilson talked about, up to a 40% power nerf on a 6 link damage?
So my first thing is he says it can be anywhere from 20 to 40%. And I'm hoping that means in the extreme cases, like I think certain support gems are going to be weighted a little bit more heavily for damage
Mm-hmm.
reduction. So if you're using the absolute most powerful combination that we know of previously, you might hit that 40. But a
Yeah.
20% for my build would have dropped me to 2.6 mil DPS, and a 40% would have dropped me down to what, 2.8? Or sorry, no, 1.8. And so the reasoning here was this makes interesting build paths more viable, which I think that's a good reason because I think it's nice to mix it up. But instead of buffing monsters, you're nerfing players, which in my opinion is just as lazy as buffing the monsters, which is what they said at the very beginning. They don't want to. Uh, they said a cheap approach is to keep increasing monster life and damage, and we don't want to do that. So what they're doing is the same thing, but they're doing it to players and saying it's different. Like, it's the same thing, and they're pretending it isn't, but it's just like you're just doing it under a different name. It works the same way, right? Like either monsters are more powerful or players are weaker. That's it.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and like that's a decent way to go about it, but it's just as lazy as nerfing monsters or buffing
yeah.
monsters.
And I have a whole other issue with the fact that they're not only nerfing player power, but I mean you would share the sentiment like making Flask feel a bit more clunky, making movement skills more clunky. I think all in all, it's like they're just trying to make a not even just a harsher experience when it comes to damage, but a harsher experience when it comes to gameplay as a whole. And you
Yeah.
talked about that you're hoping that it'd only be for the most optimized 6-link setups that like I think he said full damage setups would be the ones with the most extreme nerfs. Well, the issue is 99% of players, they put
Yeah,
full 6-link damage links unless you're playing like hardcore, where you'd put Fortify in a melee build or something that gives you some defense when when you do
and
something.
that's the strat.
Yeah, and that's just, there are very few builds in softcore where you don't have a full damage support 6-link, and the fact that they want to nerf that is by up to 40%. Hopefully for builds like Toxic Rain, Vortex, EDC, traditional, very reliable starters that don't put out the most DPS, but they do, they do the content. I'm really hoping there isn't like a 40% nerf on this, um, because
Yeah.
I kind of want to connect this. So your experience in maps, you told me before the interview that you ran into issues with optimization, right? You ran into issues with finding the next upgrade and, just finding, defensive layers to get through red maps, which is where you burned out, right? You said you burned out in red maps?
Yeah, red maps. I hit that wall. It was really sudden too. Like I was able to get through maps relatively easily, and then it got a little bit tougher. Took a little bit longer to get things down. Had to be a little bit more careful, and then I just started getting blasted. And I was
Yeah.
like, I can't. It's a lot more exalts to get past this now. I'm not making money yet.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. So, and I did want to go into that because even for me, it's someone that I've spent hundreds upon hundreds of hours optimizing Vortex Occultist, which is one of the most reliable starters in Path of Exile, because it can put out good damage. Like it puts out about 3 million damage when you start getting it optimized in deep red maps and some money into it, which is good for all beginning content in the game. Some people would argue all content in the game. But the issue is that I struggled. Like I had many hours of optimization, finding the right gear for upgrades, and that's why I made the guide, because I went through the trouble of that. Because I'm just saying this because this isn't an issue that just casual players have, new players like you. Like you having that issue in maps where you were running into these walls, that is not just a new player issue. Like even me, even veterans alike, have issues deciding the next upgrade, surviving, building defensive layers, figuring out how I'm going to get more damage, how much money do I need for certain things. And so that's why I think that for a lot of players, this whole power creep issue is not really relevant. I think this thing on Reddit where people say like, yeah, they needed to address power creep where we're killing things too fast. There's a very small percentage of the player base that is actually killing content too fast to warrant a power creep, in my opinion. Um, it's really scary to think about new players already having these optimization issues. Like sure, a build can do like 3 million DPS, but if you're not optimizing it correctly, which most new players and most, a lot of veterans alike aren't optimizing it correctly, taking up to a 40% DPS nerf already on top of that when the build is already not optimized, and you said, you had trouble like progressing through red maps, it's going to be extremely hard for these league starter builds, these new player friendly league starter builds to scale. And so I'm very worried about that. And so
I
how do
actually want to
you,
hit you with a different perspective on that.
okay.
Because so when he talks about the power creep issue, I saw it in a different way. He talks about how the numbers are getting too high, and like for monster health and damage, the numbers are just like all they can do is scale up in the way they're currently going. So what I heard there was monster health bars are just getting so huge, and it actually takes more data to make that. Like you're using more numbers. There's more count. Like it actually just uses more data on their end to do that. So
For the
they
monster
need to
health
bring it
increase,
back down.
is that what you're
Yeah,
talking
like
about?
the
Yeah,
extra
okay.
damage and stuff like that uses more data, and at a certain point can possibly slow down the game. I'm not a developer, but I've heard, like this is like an idea that I've heard before. Like literally, just having more numbers means the game runs slower. So
Mm,
they might be bringing it down to optimize the game itself a little bit, and it's just important to like keep it within reality, I guess, because like there are games that have like 4 quadrillion HP monsters that you two shot, but like
mm-hmm.
um, I do think they're partly doing it for actual game optimization as well. But like I said, there's other ways. Like they should bring down monster HP, but there's a lot of ways they can go about this, but I do think that their power creep nerf is also trying to optimize the game a little bit, not just to like bring it back to the old days. They're just trying to bring the numbers back down to help the game run smoother, possibly. I'm sure someone will roast me in the comments.
Yeah, that could be possible. So I guess like the main thing is though, so there's builds that do 20 million DPS on 10 exalts, and there's some builds that do 3 million DPS on 10 exalts. And I guess I'm just wondering, how would you think the meta would shift if these builds that have reliably been things that people want to play, like Toxic Rain, like Vortex and stuff like that, they were doing 3 million DPS, you're now doing 1.8 million DPS. Like, would you stay with that build, even though it's going to make the game a lot harder, or would you want to switch to a more meta build that's going to do like 5 to 10 million DPS on a less budget, even if it's less fun?
So, Chris
to
says
play the build, I mean,
players,
sorry.
Yeah. Chris says players will always pick the most powerful method to play the game, even if it isn't fun, which I think is a gross generalization that belittles the intelligence of the players. There's niche cases where people will do that because they make money off the game, but to me, if my build that I enjoyed now does 40% less damage, and it's basically unplayable halfway through the mapping experience as opposed to near the end, it's not a fun build anymore. So that's where you're going to see people look for the loopholes in navigating the damage reduction for the 6th link. And if their mindset is that people are just trying to pick the most powerful method to play the game, because even though it's not fun, it's because like I don't have options. You just reduced a lot of my options. So now the only way to enjoy the mapping or the campaign is I got to find loopholes to your new nerfs, just so I can kill things.
Yeah, I think that's that's the point I was wanting to get to, is that it was just really confusing to me seeing in the interview with Chris Wilson, he said that he wants to address power creep because people are choosing, like, I think that's just wrong in general. People are choosing the most powerful thing, even if it's less fun. That is indeed like a gross generalization. The only time I know that to be the case is really Hardcore Gauntlet, which is not even as GGG sponsored, just because the game is so hard, you have to choose the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
But now the game
you're doing it for the challenge.
And the game is just like, it's going to feel miserable for a lot of these builds now, like Toxic Rain, in my opinion, if you're doing only 1 million DPS when you would normally be doing 2 million, because we don't actually know if it's just the 6th link is going to be the damage nerf. We don't know if more nerfs are going to be addressed in the actual patch notes. So some people are speculating that could be up to a 60% damage nerf on some builds, which would be absolutely insane. Like, I think that would do the opposite of making people choose different builds. I feel like that would make people choose builds just so they can get through the end game, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that, I just know, for me personally, I think that's a very negative step for Path of Exile, and I think you share the same sentiment.
Yeah, I think it's lazy, is how I put it before. It's just, you're just nerfing players. You didn't find a creative solution, so you just decided to do a raw damage nerf.
Yeah, and I
don't
guess,
want to
like,
be too mean about it, but that's kind of what it is.
I mean, yeah, and this is one issue I want to get a new player's, perspective, because I go to Reddit, and the very top post on Reddit is that I'm glad that GGG is addressing power creep, and I feel like the person that posted that, either they are at just the very top end, to where they're just not bothered by things like this. Like, they're just like, hey, well, I have a build that I know of that can, even if it gets 50% nerfed, I can still do all the way through tier 16s. Or it's a player that doesn't actually realize the gravity of that nerf, of how big that is, because that is a very huge nerf, and that is going to have a massive effect on what people want to do in the game. It's gonna, people are going, they see these new skills, which I'm sure some of those skills, like, you probably looked at and you thought were really cool looking, and the issue is, if a new player plays that skill, turns out it's one of those skills that once you put it on 6th link, get some damage on, it does about 3 million. Well, now it's going to be doing 1.5 million or 1.8 million, if it's like up to 50% nerf, even 1.5 million, right? And that's just going to feel miserable. Like, when you want to do, like, a veteran player, sure, 1.5 million, they can do the content, but for a new player, doing Cyrus, as glitchy as that fight is, like their first Cyrus, it's going to be awful. It's going to be a bloodbath, and in my opinion, a lot of players are going to hate the game because of that. Yeah, like they're going to hate the game. They're going to be miserable. They're going to be frustrated at their build for not doing what they want to do, and they're just sitting here thinking like, man, this build looks so fun. The skill looks so awesome, and I just want to try it out and have fun with it. And they're just getting blasted, and they just can't. They're just hitting massive walls, and so I'm really worried about that. That is the main thing that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I think people are kind of like, I think what they're thinking is, oh, good, we're addressing power creep, so now the people at the top are going to be brought closer to our level. No.
Yeah, but it's
they're
more like the
still gonna
gap is
have
still
that
going to be
gap.
the same. Yeah, and the gap is going to be
You're
so
just gonna have a
staggering.
worse time.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the gap is going to be so staggering that these people that are like, oh, these people are going to be brought down closer to our level. No, we're going to be brought down to such a level that I can't even play my build. Especially when it comes.
They know how to optimize.
Yeah.
You maybe don't. So
yeah, because
you're
we're not
just gonna be miserable.
Yeah, because we're not just talking about a fully optimized build. I have mostly all the gear that I need. Like, I'm not even talking about like just good gear. I'm just talking about like if there's cheap damage for a budget that I could have gotten, I have it. My passive tree is in a good spot and that kind of stuff. Some of the stuff that only veteran players really know how to do effectively is completely optimize their passive tree and their gear on a budget to do the max damage that they can. And a new player's not going to know how to do that. Most new players are not going to know the next upgrade, what items I could fit in the build, even if they follow a guide. I get questions all the time on my Twitch, all the time on Discord, what should I do next? What should I get next? From players that have been playing for over 1,000 hours. And so this is going to be rough for players that, if you're not already not optimizing correctly, which most people don't, and you're taking that massive damage nerf, I feel like people are just going to be in for a miserable time. And so that's my main worry about 3.15.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Like, I think, and we won't know until the patch drops or a few days before. But like,
yeah,
I think it
is looking grim.
I think it looks pretty sketchy.
Yeah, the league mechanic does look pretty cool though. It does look like a cool league mechanic, and I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, is there any other closing thoughts that you want to talk about? Any other points about what Chris Wilson said that you wanted to talk about as a new player's perspective?
Just as this is like more of like a stats thing. So he talked about how people at I don't know what the name of the convention was, but that PoE convention who got to try PoE 2. And he said even though PoE 2's campaign was basically punitive, people still wanted to play it. They thought it was good. And my thought is, okay, so you have a sampling of people who really love PoE so much that they'd show up to a convention for it.
Yeah.
So yes,
these aren't the run-of-your-mill casual players. Yeah.
Yeah, the people who'd pay to go to a convention, fly out there. For some people, they're way more likely to just enjoy the game. They're diehard fans already. They're gonna like it. So like, you really need to take what they like with a grain of salt. I don't necessarily think games should be balanced around casual players, but you can't box casual players out. That's a dangerous path, and I think that's what Chris is doing, whether he realizes it or not. I think he's trying to attack the 1% with this new change, and I don't think it's going to hit the 1%. It's going to hit.
I mean, yeah. If that's the case,
economics doesn't work.
Yeah. If that's
it's going to hit the impoverished people.
Yeah, if that's his intention, that is a very delusional way of looking at it, because it doesn't matter what you do to the 1%. Like, they're just going to work with it. Like, they're just going to find a way, to work with that. It's not going to matter. Like, GG should really, in my opinion, be thinking about what are we doing that's affecting the 99% or even like the 80%, because when you see the Steam charts and the game has like less players than Fallout 76 after 3 weeks, like there's a glaring issue.
Yeah, that's crazy. That game sucks. It looks terrible and it doesn't play well. Like, we could probably cut that up. But break back to the question, or back to what we're talking about. I think I'm excited to see the new and interesting builds, but I think it's going to sacrifice fun, and it's going to be cool. But for how long can it stay cool? Like, I think PoE needs to get to a model where the hype doesn't die down in a week and a half. I think they need the league to keep running for a month, which is a big stretch from where they're at right now. Like, PoE content dies hard after the second week.
Yeah, I think that is true.
I
I
don't
think
think
in a
this is
very
now.
bad league it does after the second week, and I think they do usually maintain up to close to 4 weeks a good player retention, but definitely not an ultimatum. I think in ritual for sure, but um,
True.
yeah. So
I was thinking about ultimatum,
yeah, ultimate was tragic. That was a lot of mistakes there.
which I didn't think it looked that bad, but
It didn't look that bad. It was mainly the changes they made. So even if you release a pretty cool league mechanic, the changes you make affect, like, this is what's happening in this league. They nerfed the end game for a lot of. This came in the balance manifesto though. This didn't even come in the trailer. So you know what? We could give even more nerfs to the end game in this next balance manifesto. But yeah, they removed a lot of the end game that most players enjoyed after the second week. And what do you know? Everyone quit after the second week. So it will be interesting to read those and find out. But anyway, thanks for coming, Peasant. And
I do have one more thing.
oh,
I
you
just
got
want
okay?
to
Yeah,
do
sure.
your
Go ahead.
closer in this.
Yeah.
Cut
Okay.
and redo the closer, but So another note, I thought the PoE battle royale.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was like from my opinion, it's kind of like a misuse of dev time. I know people want to play it. There's a lot of people that ask for the PoE battle royale. I get that. Um, I think they could have gone a better route for releasing it. I think it'd be really cool to have it as an end of the league event. So like
Yeah.
whenever they're wrapping up and prepping for the new league to come out, uh, unleash the battle royale, let people run their in game builds and bash each other. Um, I doubt the game mode's going to get a lot of attention for any significant period of time, and that's why they're making it a weekly event. But I think you can use it as a tool to get more hype for the new league, and it's a fun way to watch your characters see out the end of the league. Like you can take your end game build and bash somebody else. I think
I think that is interesting. Like kind of a battle royale using your ability. There'd be a massive power difference, but it would be hilarious. It'd be pretty funny. I'd be interested in doing it.
Help bump their numbers.
Yeah.
Like, if it's like a once a league event, I think it makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And like more engaging.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. So, any other closing remarks you want to talk about? Any other thing about the gameplay changes or the game balance changes?
I think that's it. I'm gonna try this league and probably at least work is tough, but
yeah, understandable.
It depends if I have the mental capacity at the end of the day to get on and try this. If it's grueling, probably not.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing your experiences as a newer player, as a Path of Exile noob. And I hope you guys on the channel enjoyed this interview. If you want more like this, just let me know. I do have a friend that is more on the, I guess, experience side, and maybe you'd want to hear his opinions on the league or the gameplay changes as well. So if you want to do that, just let me know in the comments. But that'll be it, and thank you guys for watching,